All right, hello everybody. So we waited a few minutes for everyone to join us. I see that people are still jumping in. My name is Brian Baracina. I'll be the trainer for this session, and with me is also Daniel Criado, who you are seeing on the chat. Daniel, if you want to say a quick hello.
Hello everyone. Morning, afternoon. Documentation will be sent, will be actually included in the chat, and the session will be recorded. And please don't hesitate to put your questions over there, so we can just take notes. And if needed, we can send you an offline reply if we don't have time, because I think we only have 2 hours for this session, right? Over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Daniel. So exactly, right? We're recording this session already. We will also be sharing some documentation that we'll be presenting throughout the training session. We've got a good 2 hours to go through Fiori. We're going to basically go through the main features, which are navigation, which is probably one of the most interesting ones to know how Fiori works. Also some planning filters, how to perform basic searches, how to set up your notifications, and then we'll jump into the analytics and dashboard, which is probably the most interesting part to you. But without knowing how to navigate, that will be quite complicated. I see some familiar faces that we've seen in past trainings, which is a very good thing, because that means that you have already at least had a look at what Fiori looks like. We've even probably showed you already some analytics and dashboard, so this will also be a very good refresher session. I also see that Cyril Momo, our supervisor, has joined us in the session. Hello, Cyril.
Hey, good morning, Brian. Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Okay, so with no further ado, we should probably start jumping into the presentation and also the web application for Fiori. And I'll even give you guys a back and forth look at the supply chain planning tool, because you need to keep in mind that both Fiori and the supply chain planning tool work together. A lot of the things that we perform in one system will affect the other and vice versa. So let's start first with our presentation. I'll be jumping back and forth between this PowerPoint that you're going to see on screen shortly and also the system itself. So right now you should be seeing the PowerPoint presentation. We'll just move.
Yes, we can.
Daniel. All right, so just a few slides so we all know what we're showing. So again, remember we're looking at Fiori, main features, analytics, and dashboard. For those of you who are familiar with this, perfect. This is just going to be a good refresher session. For those of you who are new to this and have never seen Fiori, please maybe let us know in the chat. Add in the chat, you know, it's the first time I see this. So we also keep that in mind as we go through different screens, right? It also gives us an idea how fast or how slow we need to go through the session. So one of the main things that we need to keep in mind when talking about Fiori, and I was mentioning this right at the beginning, is the connection between the two systems, right? Fiori, we see here in the blue box here on the right, and then the Excel environment, or what you guys have already become familiar with as the supply chain planning tool, which are the Excel templates that you're familiar with already. So with the Excel templates, we were looking at how we calculate our gross demand following a sequence of processes, meaning the for example, the historical data template, the auto cleansing, classification, statistical forecast, EPP, additional demand. These are all concepts that you should be familiar with. And how now with Fiori, which is a web-based environment, we will have the support that we need for these planning processes, right? We're going to be using Fiori not only to launch reports for what we call analytics, and then maybe group them into dashboards, but we're also going to be learning how some of the filters that we've set up in our supply chain planning tool will also be available for us in Fiori, and vice versa. We can set them up in Fiori and see them. And then one of the main features of Fiori also is to view the planning processes that we will have to check, let's say, to track the work that we've been doing in the supply chain planning tool. And I'll be explaining that little by little so we all know what I'm talking about. Okay, so after this slide, I'm just going to jump in to this very next one, and then here we can jump into the system because I think it helps you a lot to see the system. So this is a screenshot of what the Fiori Launchpad looks like. If you're familiar with this, perfect. We basically work with tiles that contain different information, will allow you to access different information in the web application. As you see here at the top left, analytics, you have dashboard, change history, tasks. So we have a number of tiles each one of them will allow you to view a different part of Fiori. So this default launchpad, as you can see in the slide, is set up based on user role, taking the user close to the content that is relevant to his or her functions. So based on your role in Fiori, you should have access or visibility to certain aspects of the system. And we'll dive into the roles in a little bit, even though the roles that we're going to be looking at are going to be more focused on the planning processes, but it will still give you an idea of what you're supposed to be doing when you log into Fiori, or what you can do when you log into Fiori. So let's exit the presentation and let's take a quick look at Fiori in the system, right? So as if we're performing a demo already. So this is what Fiori looks like once you already logged in. Just quite easy. We'll also be sharing the link to access Fiori in the chat, but I would recommend that first you follow what I'm doing on screen, and then after the session, which is just 2 hours long, you guys can dive in and practice all you want. We also have exercises that we can share with you that will allow you to practice your navigation, even go through some analytics, create some dashboards, so you'll have plenty of time to play around with the system. One of the first things that we have to look at when we see Fiori here is the different ways we can navigate through the screen. So as you see here at the top, we have the different sections that Fiori is broken down to, the home page. So if you basically click on any of the other sections, the system will take you directly to the tiles that belong to that particular section. You see the man planner, and the tiles that are there are different from the ones that belong to the general planner. The same thing with the alerts, administrator, demand-driven replenishment planner, or even planning basics. You see we have a number of ways of navigating through the different sections in Fiori. I'm going to go back to the top, and you can also basically just scroll down and go to the different sections just by scrolling down one by one. Okay, now if you have any questions as I go through the basics of navigation, please, what I would recommend is to first add them to the chat. Daniel will be monitoring that, and what I'll do is once I'm done with a particular section of this presentation, I'll stop, we'll take a look at the questions, and we'll try to answer them. If we need clarification with those questions, just raise your hand and you guys can speak up. All right, but let's do this little by little. I'll go through some of the sections I want to show you guys, and then we'll stop for some questions if there are any in the chat. So first thing was the basic navigation, as how to click on the different sections. That'll take you to the different tiles in the main page of Fiori. You also have this option if you click here on the home icon, the drop down that you see. Once you click on this, you'll see that you have the tiles represented here one by one after the other, that you can also scroll down to and go directly by just clicking on one of these. For example, if I clicked on favorites here, I would navigate directly to the favorites tile. All right. So that's one way of accessing one of the tiles. That's one way of navigating through the different sections. If, for example, I just didn't want to go here, you can just click back and go to your home page, and that'll take you right back to the main page that we were looking at before. Okay, so you can either click on one of the tiles to go directly to that section. You can select it from the drop down here, depending on what works best for you. If you want to click on one of these, and you can navigate by either clicking on the different sections up top or scrolling up and down. Okay, that's basically just to access different tiles in this main screen. Now, if we go here to the right section where you see the profile icon, which should be the one for myself, and you click on this, one of the first things you should be doing when accessing Fiori is the following. So you have your name here up top that indicates that this is your account for Fiori. You have your recent activities, frequently used, app finder, settings, edit home page. So you can even change the way your home page looks. Okay, I'll leave that to you guys. What I do want to show you is under settings, if I click on this wheel right here, we will have our basic settings for our user account, as you see here. The appearance of what Fiori looks like in our main page, basically the colors, and also the way we display. If we click on display settings, we can also have different theme or display settings. Okay, very basic stuff for you guys to play around with. We have our home page as well. So show all content or show one group at a time. Your user activities, Okay, track my recent activity and frequently used apps. If you check this box, when you go back to the section where we saw our homepage, I believe here, we can see here, show all content, only the ones that you checked at a time. We also can have the option to change your language and even the date format, time zone, and so on. One of the most important sections here under settings is notifications. And this is one of the first things that you should be doing when you log into Fiori. Click on notifications and just make sure that you have checked the show high priority notification alerts. Also receive the notifications through email, the ones that are high priority, and make sure that you enable this. Okay, if I disable, we won't receive any emails, but still receive the high priority notifications only on Fiori. And if we enable it, we will now also receive an email notification if, let's say, there's something for us to do. And we'll get that, like what exactly would be left for us to do in this system. One of the things I recommend first is to go to your user, remember the profile, click on settings, I'll repeat that quickly, go to notifications, and enable the notifications through email. Okay, once you're done with that, just click on save, and now you'll be receiving your notifications through email as well as through the notifications icon that you have here on your main menu. So once the screen loads completely, you see here, we have our little bell, which will show us the notifications if we have any. Okay, I have none, so you don't see anything, but you will basically receive them through here or in your email. So remember, click on your profile. Once that opens, click on settings. Once you have the settings open, go directly to notifications and make sure you set up your notifications. Okay, so that's one of the first things I want to show you guys. Okay, so Daniel, I just showed them quickly the notifications process, then the navigation through the different sections, also through the drop down. Is there any question on this? I know it's quite basic, but you never know.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, it was quite clear. We have the comments in the chat related to the documentation when it will be shared. And of course, we will send out an email to all of you right after the session with all the documentation and the link to the recording as well. But one of the, I know that you're going to show later, but one colleague was wondering, which is exactly the URL or how do you access the solution itself? Because we started right from the dashboard. So he was actually wondering how, if it is the same access as the IDP part, or if we're going to use another type of access in order to access Fiori. Over to you.
All right, thank you. So yes, we'll share the link shortly. I was just afraid that if I shared it too early, you guys would start diving into the system and clicking here and there, and I wanted you guys to really pay attention as to what I'm doing here. And then we'll show you how to log in, which is actually very simple, and it's a process that we're very familiar with. Okay, we'll share the link shortly, and we'll show you guys exactly how to log into the system. I'll log myself out, and we'll show you that step by step. Okay, but for now, just follow what I'm doing on screen, and I think that'll be the best option. One of the other features of navigation that you guys may have noticed is also here the magnifying glass. If I simply click on the magnifying glass and type in what I want to search for, like you say, I already know I want to look for planning filters, you can simply type that here, and you'll see that you already have a search result. For example, if I put here planning filter, there you go. You'll see the planning filters in apps. And once I click on this, the only thing that should be displayed on my screen is the planning filters icons or tiles. See right here, like this, we can also reduce the amount of tiles that we have on screen and just go directly to the ones that we're interested in navigating to. Okay, let's go back to our home page. Remember, just by clicking on the drop down here, or you can also click on the back arrow right here. So once I go to the home page, we go back to our main page with all our tiles. Now, one of the first things that we want to learn how to do here is to plan our filters, or really to create our filters. Now, here's where I'm going to be jumping back and forth from the supply chain planning tool and also Fiori, because the planning filters that we're going to be setting up here are the same ones that we worked with on the supply chain planning tool. Okay, so let me just click on the planning filters icon so you guys can see the screen that I'm going to. And the first thing I'm going to do is show you how we can search for our planning filters. Now remember, these are the same filters that you guys created in the supply chain planning tool. Okay, and I'll go to the supply chain planning tool now and show you how I have the same filters I'm going to search for here, and also if I create them in one system or another, how they become available in both. Okay, for example, you see at the bottom, I have all the filters that have been either shared or created by me or shared with me. So any of the filters that any of our students in the training environment have created and shared are all here. You can go to the search box and just write the name of that planning filter. For example, I know I had one starting with BB, and you see once I click on enter, I have the filters that I have already created in the supply chain planning tool itself. Now we're going to go to the supply chain planning tool right now and see how these filters, BB cohort 5, BB training, BB filter training practitioner, these are all already in my supply chain planning tool. So you guys can relate what I'm showing you now with what you already know and you're already familiar with. Okay, so if I jump into the supply chain planning tool Excel, this is one you're already familiar with, hopefully. Remember, we clicked on new view to load our templates. Remember this, so this is all something that you're familiar with. If we went down to our filters and we searched for our filters here, these are the same filters that we have available in Fiori for the planning filters. So for example, if I want to search for the one that I was just looking for, the BB, I should have my filters right here. I think I saved them under a specific folder so that it would be easy for me to find, but they're right here. You see BB training, BB cohort 5. So the ones that start with the two initials BB are already here. So these are filters I have created in the supply chain planning tool and are also available for me in the Fiori web application. Okay, so remember these. If I go back to my web application, these are exactly the ones I'm looking at here. If I click on BB cohort 5, you'll see that the way it is broken down, for example, the filter criteria that I have is plant equal to K00 and 4 different product IDs that I selected when I created my filter. And I don't think I added anything else but sharing my filter with a colleague, Saida Sagid, and also the administrative information of when it was created on, okay, and who created it. So if I go back to the supply chain planning tool and I select this filter, you'll see how it's the plant K00 and the product IDs themselves. Okay, I'll go here. I'll look for the filter itself just to show you guys that it's exactly what you're already familiar with. So BB cohort 5, we'll see that our filter is K00 and we have our information with our product IDs. If I switch this to the ID instead of the description, we see that we have 4 product IDs. So that's exactly it. You guys can create your filters in the supply chain planning tool and then view them here in Fiori, or you can create them in Fiori. I'm going to do both. Okay, I'm going to do both. I'm going to create one quickly in the supply chain planning tool so you see that it's available here, and then I'm going to create one in the Fiori web application so you guys see how it's also available in your supply chain planning tool and how to also do it in Fiori. Okay, so if I'm going to create a new filter, I just click on add. I think we're all familiar with this, so I can do this quickly. So I can do here BB Fiori. So I can find this one. I'll click on add, and this filter, which is now called BB Fiori, will have this plant and these product IDs. If I go back to my web application, I should be able to now, if I refresh, to see exactly an extra BB Fiori. And if I click on it, there it is. All right, so now we know how these two systems talk to each other and how they work simultaneously if we add data in one or data in another. Now, if I want to create my filter here in Fiori and I want to have it available in my supply chain planning tool, we would have to go down here where the plus sign is found. You see this plus sign here where it says add. Once I click on it, I will have the option to now start creating my filter. First thing we can do is add the filter name. In this case, I'll just call it BB Fiori 2. The planning area, that in the training environment, you should only have one planning area available to you, which should just be the one for ZUN train, okay, for the training environment. Once you're in production, you should have one for your specific planning area. And also the group that you can select or not. Remember that you only require 2 fill in the ones that have the red asterisk next to it. The group that we can select, in this case, will have none. In production, if you have any, you should choose the group that relates to you. But here we don't have any to select from. It's not also required, so you don't even have to fill this in. And the filter criteria works the same way as it does in the supply chain planning tool. So the first thing you do is select an attribute. And remember, the attributes are things that are linked to the product ID, commodity ID, plant, so anything that would be an attribute in the supply chain planning tool. If we went to the attributes here, remember this section for attributes, if you're familiar with it, whatever is available for you here will be available for you also in Fiori. So if I want to add a specific product ID, what I would have to do is in Fiori first say that I want to look for product ID. See how it's reducing my search. I will select that equal to, and here's where I would add my values. I can also add another option for plant, which would be very useful for me. Okay, in this case, I'll write plant, select it, and even add a value here. Okay, so if I select my plant, oh, I'm not going to select them all, sorry. I can just add the plant information here, click on the magnifying glass, and select the plant that belongs to me. Okay, you guys should have available to you the plant that you're working with, the plant that you are in presently. You shouldn't have access to all the different plants in the system. Once you select your plant and you click on select, your plant will be there, just like it works in the supply chain planning tool. Now let me add just a couple of product IDs that I have here in my Excel, for example, my oil machine. It's selected, there you go. Here it is, and we just paste it in here. Okay, so we have our product. You can just go with one or go with two. Here's where you can add your product ID, your commodity. We'll start playing around with that now. Now, why is this planning, these planning filters interesting for you? Because if you do all the work initially, right? If, for example, you set up the filters that you want to set up now, just like you did with the supply chain planning tool, you don't have to do this every time you want to create a separate analytics report, right? So we'll see how useful this is later on when we dive into the reports themselves. All right, this will save you a lot of time as we go on. So let me just make sure that I select the product ID, click on select, and this would basically be my very first planning filter that I'm creating in Fiori. Something that I gave a name, I selected the planning area, which is my training environment, product ID, plant, and also the option to share it with different users, just like you did with the supply chain planning tool filter. You could also share it with different users. So you can do that here too. You can click on the matchbox and add the name of a user. Like for example, I will add the name of Daniel Criado, which I think is here, who is working with us during this training. So I'll write Daniel, and here you go. And just by selecting Daniel, what I'm telling the system is that I want this filter to be shared with Daniel. So when Daniel goes into Fiori, can also search for my filter. All right, so there you go, Daniel Criado, or with a specific user group. So this can also be very useful for you. If I click on the matchbox, you'll see all the different user groups that are available in the training environment. In your mission, you should also have a number of user groups that you can select and share your filter with a number of people instead of going one by one and selecting them here. For example, if I wanted to select all my planners in K00 that are related to the training group, I can simply select them and share this filter with them as well. Okay, so that is very basically how you create a planning filter. The last step would be to save it. And once I save it, this BB Fiori _2 will now be not only in Fiori, but will also be available to me right here in the supply chain planning tool. Okay, if I go back to the supply chain planning tool, I should be able to view this under my filters. Okay, we should also have this BB here. Okay, if I can find it with the list. Okay, so we have still our BB Fiori here, or maybe I need to refresh the page. Let me just go out and I'll go back in. So Daniel, if there's any question in the meantime, let me know while I search for that filter that I have just created.
Okay. Yeah, I think you explained very thoroughly how these filters work actually in both ends and how they are linked. We had a question from Hakida on are these filters available for use when we create our analytics in Fiori? I think you just showed the dynamics, but I just want to make sure that yeah, we answered that question.
So are these filters what? Sorry, are they available?
Available when we create our analytics in Fiori.
Yes. So, okay. So this is the training environment, right? So once you jump into production, you'll have to create your own planning filters. Once you've created them, they'll be available for you. But there shouldn't be anything there in production, right? You should be able to see these in the training environment, definitely the ones that you've already created in the supply chain planning tool. So you can already practice with them. Yes, they will be available for you. But once you dive into production, you'll have to create them from scratch. Okay, I'm also
Thank you.
the web application just because I see that it's not becoming available as of yet under my filters, but it could take a little bit of time. But I should already see. I see here BB Fiori, but I don't see the _2 yet. Okay, but you should have it available in both. Okay, I still see my past ones, but not the new ones. So it's probably just a matter of time. Maybe I'll check later on and see if they're available. Anything else on those planning filters?
Yes. Well, we had a question not strictly related to the filters. It was a previous question from Esther Alapa. She's wondering how to link this to the office procurement requirements. Is there any connection? I think this is more a business-related question. I don't. So maybe it would be better to just give the floor to Esther, so you can elaborate a little bit more the question. Esther?
Being the first time to see this platform, Fiori, I'm just wondering if what we're being taught in the training at the moment is going to be linked to what our office requirements are, what we do, how when we are planning for a procurement, maybe yearly procurement for the office. Is there going to be a link? Are we going to now have to enter our data into this platform and then be able to, colleagues in the office to be able to pick up from the platform itself? So is there a link between this and procurement, the procurement we're doing in Umoja and the planning we do in the office?
Okay, so I think we're still looking at the planning filters. Okay, so there's definitely a linkage between what you do in the supply chain planning tool when you're planning for your gross demand and what you do on your daily work. Now, you should already during the training have understood how those two are linked together, right? What you do in the supply chain planning tool and what you do in your daily work. But if we're talking about the linkage between Fiori and your daily work or Fiori and the supply chain planning tool, right now we're just stepping into the very first steps, right? We're still on the filtering options. I think maybe it's going to become clearer to you how this system will be useful, if I think that's where the question is going for you, once we jump into the dashboards and the analytics. Okay, but everything you do in the supply chain planning tool, right? When you're analyzing the data from your historical, from your the data that is cleansed, classified, your statistical forecast, all that is helping you plan for your gross demand, right? We still haven't jumped into your net demand or your budget formulation or anything like that. This is only allowing you to understand what will be your requirements for the future. Fiori, when Fiori jumps into play, Fiori will allow you to play around with those filters that you have in the supply chain planning tool and also view data in a more graphical way. Okay, but I think we're maybe jumping way too ahead of ourselves, or we're still asking questions on the supply chain planning tool. I'm not sure. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think once we jump into analytics, I think we'll see the relationship. But I think that question was more linked to supply chain planning tool and how this relates to my daily work.
Yeah.
Daniel?
Just Hoover, I think Ghassan has a question just before yourself. He raised his hand. Ghassan?
Yes,
Hi, Brian. Hi, Daniel. Regarding this, what we do on the Excel file, we can see it here. This is exactly what you said, right? What the local demand planner create as their requirements for the section or unit. We can see it here in the Fiori. But you mentioned also that we can create it from here, starting with the Fiori. So can you just go back and show us exactly how it will look like in the Fiori, not in the Excel file? Because the table here that you added the product IDs, but before adding the product IDs, can we see how can, like, we have a list of the equipments or services, and then we can select the product IDs for these services?
Okay, so just to be clear, right? When the Fiori does not replace the supply chain planning tool, right? Remember that.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, so when we load our data here for the historical data, statistical forecast, here is where we are performing the transactional actions that will have an impact in our gross demand. Fiori is just basically grabbing that data and displaying it for you in a graph, right? When we get to the analytics, you'll see that. The first thing that I was showing you guys is how the filtering options work in both ways, right? Work first here in the supply chain planning tool, and whichever filters that we create here will be available for us in Fiori and vice versa. But you're not going to be performing adjustments to historical data or adjustments to the statistical forecast in the Fiori web application. Okay, here with this application, all we're going to be doing is extracting the actions that we have performed in the supply chain planning tool. So we'll be able to view this when we go to the analytics and the dashboards. But right now, we're not doing that yet. We're not going to be able to adjust our historical data in Fiori, okay, if that's where your question is going. The actions are to be performed in the supply chain planning tool.
Brian, what we are showing us here, that's what you created in Fiori, right?
This is, yeah, but this is only a filter.
Yes, a filter, but it's like, okay, it is on a page for a requirement, or no?
Sorry, I don't understand the part of.
I said it is on page for requirement, like these are product IDs and the plant is there. So is it the same page that we create on the Excel sheet?
Okay, because you know what? Let me go, when we dive into the analytics, you will understand better why I'm doing the planning filters. Right now, we're only setting up a filter. That's all.
Okay.
So when we run a report, we don't have to retype all this information in if we don't want to, okay? But you'll see when we dive into the analytics how much easier it is to understand. The first thing I was showing you is just how to create a filter in the dashboard, just the same way as you created it in the supply chain planning tool, okay? That's the only thing, but you're not performing the same actions.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Just make sure that that's clear before we keep moving on.
Thank you, Ghassan. That was a pertinent question. So we have a clear principle now. Question from, well, I know the Hoover is in there online for a question. You raise your hand, but I think Gisela made a point. This should be kind of like a Power BI/BI type of system linked to the supply chain planning tool. In a way, we could say that, right? Over to you, Brian.
Exactly, right? You're using Fiori to display reports, if you want to call them reports, or analytics on whatever you have performed or whatever is available in the supply chain planning tool. That's why I like to show them both at the same time, so that you guys can see that the actions performed in one system have an impact in the other. But you only perform the adjustments in the supply chain planning tool, right? The data that you're working with, the actions that you're taking to adjust any information are done in the supply chain planning tool. Fiori is just displaying that for you. Okay, you don't take any actions in Fiori to alter your historical data or to change your statistical forecast. You're only extracting that data to view it in Fiori. That's it. Maybe that also clarifies it.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian. I think now, Hoover, over to you. I know that you were waiting for some time.
No, it's okay. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Brian. Let me do, if I understand correctly, Fiori, the only thing it's going to do is similar, as explained by Daniel, is the BI. Similar. I don't know if it's more, it's going to help more or not in the future. However, one of the bases that you mentioned is analytics, is make analysis.
Yes.
It means in the supply chain management, you have a different stakeholders is going to keep this analysis. BI unit is one of them, procurement is one of them, demanding planning one of them, and of course it's going to end with the technical sections and probably with budget, and it's a lot of interview there, it's a lot of link there. Now, one call is ask the questions in procurement, and I think this is important question. Why? Because procurement has a procurement acquisition plan that is also based on analysis, and this analysis starts for the demanding. Then, if procurement doesn't have access to this Fiori, it means one part of all this interaction will be missed in the process. I leave to you to, if you can explain this, Brian. Thank you.
Yes, the access to Fiori will be available to planners. So whoever has the role that and is working on the supply chain planning tool will also be able to view this information in Fiori. This analytics dashboard, this web application will be available, and you will be able to also extract the information and view it if you're working with the procurement team, for example, and you have the role, you will also be able to view this information. Okay, so it's not we're not limiting some people to have access and others not, right? If you're a planner, you will have access to the supply chain planning tool and also Fiori. And once we get into the reports, you guys will be able to see what I'm talking about, right? Because we're just basically scratching the surface right now. I just wanted to show you guys about the filters, and I think we're really jumping ahead of the session. We're in the last 30 minutes of our session, and we're only at the beginning. So if I can just keep moving on with the basic navigation, and then we jump into the analytics, you guys will be able to see really what this tool will offer you in terms of reports. And understanding that you will have access to these reports, maybe that's something that's also important to you. But yes, you will have access to these reports. If you are in this training, if you have access to the supply chain planning tool, if you're a planner, you will have access to these reports. Hopefully that
Thank you very much, Brian.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Daniel?
No more questions. Over to you, Brian. I think it's better once we launch the different, the dashboards and the data analytics. Everything will, be connected together. Over to you.
Yeah. Very. Is that another question?
I think Emilia. I see that you unmuted yourself, Emilia Zamora. Over to you. Oh no. Okay, she is muted.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
All right. So very good. Okay. So as I'm seeing where the interest is going, and we're talking a lot about the analytics and the reports, after I selected the planning filters, which I thought was really the basics to start with, we can now, let's jump in to the analytics, and maybe we can, when we go through that, everything will become clearer for you. Okay. So I'll start with the analytics a bit earlier, because the other navigation features I think are quite clear, but I think this will definitely make you realize where we're going with this, okay? So we've set up a filter, let's say. We've set up a planning filter. Now let's see why that's important, not only for our supply chain planning tool, but also for our analytics. So let's say we want to run a report, right? We want to run a report on whatever has been done for the historical data template. So you remember the historical data template that we worked on, that we set up our filters. So for example, if I want to go back to the BB Fiori, here you go. I'm going to run this report here right now. I'm going to run this template so you guys can see that the data that we're displaying here will now be also visible in Fiori when I run the analytics report, okay? So let's go back now while this supply chain planning tool loads, and we'll go back to our Fiori web application, and we'll click on analytics. Okay, let's click on this tile here, analytics. And let's see now how we're going to visualize in a report way, and we're talking about Power BI. So how this is going to be also easy for us to see. So once I go into analytics, what you will see right from the beginning, if there are reports already created, is a number of reports or analytics that other people have created in your team or that you have created yourself. As you can see here, this is the training environment. So we have reports created by everyone that we have trained. You have a number of them here, and they're all available for us to search for, right? If we had a report that somebody had created for you, we would be able to search for it through here. But before we search for those, so you guys don't get confused as to why I'm seeing this report and that report, let's create one from scratch. Let's use the planning filter that we just added before, and let's save it, and then we can search for it so it becomes clearer to you. So if I say I want to create an analytics report or just an analytics of the historical data that I'm seeing in the supply chain planning tool, and that's why I'm going to run back and forth from the two. If I click on create here and I say analytics chart, what the system is going to already prepare for you is the first few steps to create your analytics, right? You'll see now that I have a blank template once the screen loads that is going to tell me, okay, what report do you want to create? So this analytics tile that we just accessed will allow us to create our very first report. So let's create our report and first give it a name, right? Let's create a name first. This one, I'm going to call it the same as I called my filter, BB Fiori, so I don't start creating different names. This is the only really required option here, but I'm going to recreate in an analytics report in Fiori what I'm getting from my supply chain planning tool here. Okay, that's why I'm showing you both of these. This is the supply chain planning tool. Here's where you go in as planners to adjust your consumption history, to view your consumption history, to save the data, to give a reason. So this is what you use to come up with your final gross demand, right? Fiori is only going to display this data in a report the way that you want to see it, whether it's in a graph, whether it's in a pie, or however you want to see it. So let's do that little by little. The first thing we do is we give this one a name, okay, like we did now. You can also give it a description, but let's go little by little. We also have our planning area. That is only the training environment that we have here. And then we also have a number of other options, which are our key figures, group by series, planning notes, target currency, target unit of measure. So we have this information here. Now, before I even go to any of these options, one of the first things I want to do is rescue that planning filter that I created before. If you see here at the top, we have already a number of filter options that are already given to you here or that are displayed for easy or quick access. We can add more filters by clicking on this option here, filters. But let's work with what we have now on screen. Remember the planning filter that we created. You can click on the drop down and simply scroll down. See if you want to. I see here my BB Fiori or my BB Fiori 2. If I want, since in the supply chain planning tool, I know I have selected my filter BB Fiori, I'm going to select the same filter here. Why am I doing that? So that I have the same data displayed here as I have on my supply chain planning tool. I want these products to be displayed in my reports, 1, 2, 3, and 4 for this particular plant. And that's why I spent some time creating the planning filter. If you see, the filter that we're looking at is BB Fiori here. And that's the filter that I'm selecting here. No data is showing yet because if you see, the auto refresh is paused. But right now we're telling the system, I want to see plant K00 and I want to see those 4 product IDs just by selecting that planning filter that we have created. So now if you work in procurement and you know you want to look at some specific plant, some specific contracts, commodities, product IDs, you can do that using Fiori as well. You can recreate the information that you have in your supply chain planning tool now in Fiori with a nice graph or pie chart. And that's where we're going to. Okay, so before I launch this report, let's see what else we can do with our report. So remember, I gave it a name. If we keep going down, we'll see one of the major features of Fiori here when creating our reports, which is our key figures. These key figures in our reports are the same key figures that we have in your supply chain planning tool when you go here. For example, if I click on edit, remember your key figures, these three key figures, consumption history, adjusted consumption history, and final consumption history, those three key figures that are important for you in your historical consumption should be available for you in Fiori as well. So what do we want to see in this report? Do we want to see our final consumption? Do we want to see our adjusted consumption? Do we want to see both? So you can do that. Let's create a report where we see both our final consumption and our adjusted consumption. Okay, remember, those are the same key figures that we're looking at here. Okay, these three, and I can highlight them in yellow for you guys. Three key figures. We go here, and let's select those key figures now for the report. These are the key figures I want to display in my report. So we have the, I think it was the adjusted consumption history. So I can just write adjusted, click on the magnifying glass, and you see that your results are starting to show basically what you want. So adjusted consumption history is one of the key figures that I want to show in my report. I select it, and that's one of them. I can click on select. That's one of the key figures that will display here that is going to be represented in my report shortly. But I also said I want to see my final consumption history, right? So let's also add that key figure in my report. So we go back here and we search for that final consumption history key figure as well. Final consumption, and we should have, there you go, final consumption history. I'm going to select it, and that's going to also be another key figure that this report is going to show me. Okay, adjusted consumption and final consumption history. Let's leave the group by for later, the same thing as group by series for later as well. You guys scroll down, your planning notes, if you guys remember this from your training, those relate to the planning notes if you added any in the supply chain planning tool. Remember these planning notes that we added to some of the cells, the one with the red triangles? If anyone has added a planning note, you can also display that in your report. Okay, we'll show you that very quickly. Let's see, before I'm going to leave it on don't show for now. I'm going to go to target currency. Now, this is very dangerous, or you should be very careful here, because if you don't have the appropriate target currency displayed, you may have no results in your report. Your target currency, remember, by default in Fiori, in the supply chain planning tool, is US dollars. So make sure that you have US dollars selected. And your target unit of measure should also be the same one as it was in the supply chain planning tool, BAS. Okay, which is your base unit of measure. Now that I have selected those two, let me run my report and see what I'm going to get. So remember, I'm going to run a report with these two key figures for the plant that is in my planning filter, KE00 with my 4 product IDs. Once you click on the auto refresh button, we should be getting some sort of report, right? It may be a little messy right now, but we should be getting something. And again, this will be available to US planners. This is what Fiori really is going to be helping you with, creating reports. Now, we're still just creating it. This is like we're in draft mode right now. We're still selecting, adding things that we're interested in seeing. The good thing about Fiori and the analytics option is that it's live, right? Whatever it is that you're playing around with here will automatically display on your template here on your report. Now, right now, it's very, I would say it's very dirty, it's very drafty. All I have here is my key figures, final consumption history, which is represented here for those product IDs, but I don't know which one is which. All I have is just an amount. I have my adjusted consumption history, which is the one at the bottom, so I know that there are some adjustments, but I don't really know what is it that I'm looking at, okay? And I'll show you why. We know that it's filtered by those 4 product IDs in that plant because that's the filter that I added, but we haven't displayed that in our report yet. And here is where we go to our group by and also group by as series. Let's first group this data that we're looking at into those product IDs. And how do we do that? So we have to tell the system that we want to see this information grouped by the product IDs that we have in this filter. Since we already have the product IDs in this filter, we don't have to add those product IDs. All we have to do is add the attribute. Okay, let's click on this matchbox and let's see what attributes are available for us. Now, if you remember the attributes from the supply chain planning tool, those are the same attributes that you were working with here. If I go back to my template, remember that you also had a list of attributes, right? Plant, commodity, product ID, and so on. So these are the attributes that we're now going to be selecting in Fiori. If I go back to Fiori and I write here product ID, okay, I'll click on the magnifying glass, we should see everything filtered by product, and I see my product ID. I'm going to select product ID, and select it here, and that should automatically, see, it's already refreshing my data, and now it's already breaking down by the product IDs that I have selected in my planning filter. So these product IDs are already there because I had added them to my filter before. All right, that's 2 services and the 2 product IDs, the same exact ones that I'm looking at when I'm looking at my historical data. Okay, my 4 product IDs, the same ones. But I'm not viewing the data like this. I'm viewing it in a nice graph that works for me. Now, we're not done yet. We can still play around with this a little more. What else can we do? Why don't we break this down into months, right? Or maybe years, so we understand exactly what we're looking at. Right now, we haven't told the system that we want to see this particularly in a month or a specific time period. If you see, one of the options available for you is time period. You select that matchbox and you have the option to say that you want to display it by day, by week, by month, by quarter, or by year. So maybe we're interested in seeing monthly or maybe yearly what these products look like, right? Let's go with month. If I select month, we also have an option to select a different selection mode of a time frame for the month, which is either a range, multiple months, previous months, or next few months. Let's say that I want to see June, July, and August. So then I would select next few months, and I would add here the number of months I want to see after June. So if I say 2, I'm going to see July and August. Okay, if I click on OK, you'll see that my data now will again refresh, and I will display the next 2 months, starting with June, July, and August. But it doesn't look that well for me yet. It's not displayed here. Remember, up top, you're only setting your filters, but here on the right side, this is what you're telling the system to display. So since I haven't told it to display the months, it's not showing me the months yet. The data that I have is broken down into months, but it's not displayed in your graph until you add it here to the attributes. So if I select the matchbox and I put months here, and I click on enter, now when I select month and click on OK, my data will now be grouped by month and product ID. You see, as it's displayed here. It still may not look as pretty as you want it to look, and you can also work around with this. And I'll go with the questions in a second. Let me just finish these last 2 things, and maybe this also helps you understand, right, how Fiori helps you with the information that we're looking at. So if I go here to group by as series, you'll now see that I have the options of product ID and month. By selecting one or the other, what I'm going to tell the system is that I want the legend that is driving my report to either be the month or the product ID. If I select product ID, watch what happens. The product IDs now will show here, and everything will be displayed monthly. If I switch that to months, the months will be broken down here, and the product IDs will be broken down on the left side. You guys can also change your the type of graph that you're displaying by scrolling down and selecting a different type of graph. Okay, if I go with the columns, that works a bit better for me. We can also see that here. But maybe it's better if I just display it by product ID instead on the legend, and I have the breakdown in months here. Okay, so this is just how we start working with the reports in Fiori. Now, before we finalize it and before we play around with it and we give it our final report and we save it, any questions, Daniel? Maybe now the planning filter makes more sense, why we created it in the beginning.
Exactly. Actually, it's I don't see many comments or questions, actually none in the chat. I think that now the filter feature now makes sense in a way that we know exactly the impact of those actions before just generating the reports, right? Now, this is the real thing, right, of the session, how the report is visualized, which attribute will drive your analysis, how you can play around with the data visualization, which are the key figures you may want to use, right? The filter option before was just a way for you to give you an idea of how you can create the filters and share those filters with other users, which is a really nice functionality from the Fiori point of view. And now Lara is asking in the chat, thank you, Lara, nice to see you. In the example, are we seeing the difference between the final and the adjusted? So are we seeing the difference between those two key figures?
Exactly, right? So what we would be seeing here is the difference. So for example, if I go back to the supply chain planning tool, we'd be seeing the difference between the adjusted and also the final consumption history, right? So if this is what works for you, this is what we would be seeing. Now you did realize that in my Fiori report, I said next 2 months starting with June, right? Since we're looking at historical data, we would be better off maybe going backwards, right, in time. So instead of the next 2 months, I'm going to display the previous months instead, right? So we have a range of 2 months in the past. Like this, we have a bit more data, and maybe like this, we also can have a better view of what we're looking at here. See? So there you go. This may work a little better for us. So if we're looking at the different products here, maybe we have a little too many. Maybe we can reduce the amount of products that we have, but we would be seeing exactly that, right? The adjusted consumption, for example, for one service, and its final consumption. Now, if the job has already been run in the supply chain planning tool, the two will be the same, right? Because remember, once you adjust, the final consumption becomes the same one. So maybe instead of the final consumption history, we want to show the consumption history before it was adjusted, right? Maybe that makes more sense to us. And that's where I want to go next with this report. I want maybe one of you guys to tell me what you would like to see, and I can play around with the system to display it for you. So yes, Lara, in a nutshell, that's what you would be seeing. The key figures and the data for the final consumption history of a product and the adjusted consumption history.
Thank you, Lara, for that. Javier Sanchez, and hi, Javier. Hello, the supply chain planning tool is asking, updates data every 24 hours in the databases. Would Fiori automatically update the dashboard within the same time frame along with the supply chain planning tool? Kind of like what BI does in Umoja? Over to you.
Okay, so there should be a time frame of the refresh in production, because remember that even if I did go here and adjusted this consumption right now from 150 to 20, and I saved it, remember that there still needs to be a job run in the supply chain planning tool before your final consumption history has been processed. So it wouldn't be immediate. You would have some time in between the changes. Okay, so it's not going to be a one-to-one. We're not going to make a change here and see it in Fiori. The job would first have to be run. So we'd be looking at, I don't know exactly the amount of time, Daniel. I don't know if it's 8 hours or 24 hours, but I know there's a time frame to it.
Javier, we can just double check exactly what is the time range, but it's like I don't know if it's going to be like what happens in BI, that is 24 hours, probably not. But yes, there is a batch that refreshes all data and refreshes the data in the template to Fiori. And Lara now is asking, can we directly see search for the changes that occurred? So kind of like a log of changes.
Okay.
I am assuming.
All right, let me just, because I was just trying to reduce the amount of information that we're seeing at once, right? So that when we look at our data in Fiori, we can also see that here. So a way to only see the changes. So basically, if you want to see the changes, I would only add the key figure for the adjusted consumption. And now, the thing is, we're really going to be jumping back and forth from things. What I can show you is the managing processes that we can do in Fiori, so we understand if something has been changed. But there is no, if I leave this right now, I'm going to lose all the data unless I quickly save it. But Lara, as far as I'm aware, I don't think you can only see the log of changes. What you can see is if somebody has performed an action in the system, let's say adjusted the historical data and has checked their adjustment as something that they have completed, you will be able to see that if something has been done in the system. As to exactly what, unless you run the report and select your adjusted consumption key figure, you wouldn't be able to see it. But now, before I jump into the managed processes, maybe we can still stick to this for a little bit longer. Okay, but I think maybe I've answered your question there already. So you can't see the exact change unless you add your adjusted consumption key figure or any other key figure that will represent a change in the system. But you will see if there has been a change performed, and you can track that in the system.
Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. I think that this is a very pertinent question in the chat from Isma. Thank you, Isma. Nice to see you there. She's asking, can we add and adjust any line which we see that the local planner has not put correctly? And I think that I know where she's going. And I think it's important to clarify this point between the difference between these two systems, transactional versus reporting in the supply chain planning tool. Over to you.
Okay, so let's say I'm understanding that, let's say you run this report and you see that there's been a mistake and something that needs to be adjusted. Now, if you are a planner that works in the same planning group as your colleague, and you have the option and the access to go into the supply chain planning tool and perform that adjustment, sure thing. But you remember, the adjustments have to be made in the supply chain planning tool. You would have to load the historical data template. You would have to come in here to the adjusted consumption key figure and make the adjustment here for it to then reflect in Fiori. But Fiori would definitely be a very good tool for you to understand if something has been done correctly or not. Okay, but remember, the adjustment cannot be made in Fiori itself. You would have to go into the supply chain planning tool. If you work with your colleague, you both have access to these templates, and you both have the access to adjust consumption history, then yes, you should be allowed without an issue to make that adjustment. I think that's where the question is going.
Exactly. The adjustments at the end of the day are done in the tool itself, rather than in Fiori, right? Fiori is just a reflection of what's going on in the supply chain planning tool. Lara, she's asking more on the changes. If you can show, can we see Brian? Can we see what Brian was saying about seeing the changes, or is it going to be part of the job aid? She's focusing on these changes in the Fiori side of the tool.
Yeah, sure. I think that's more related to the managed processes that we can jump in and see later. It's more linked. Remember, just Lara, just so you know, before I jump into that, it's like a tracking device, right? Remember for write-offs in ECC that we have a notification created with a list of tasks. Managed processes is basically a list of tasks that users will go in and say, check, I have done my part of the work, check, I have done my part of the work. So you'll be able to see if someone has made an adjustment, but not exactly what adjustment has been made. Okay, so you will be able to see the data reports the way you're seeing them here. So if any adjustment has been made, it will be displayed in your report, but you won't know exactly what adjustment by how much unless you jump into the supply chain planning tool, like I'm doing right now. Here is the only place where you would be able to see this change and more details linked to this change. The managed process that I want to show you guys during this session is basically just a tracking tool of work performed by a certain person.
Thanks, Brian. We don't have more comments in the chat, but I think, I don't know, Deborah, you just unmuted yourself. Over to you, Deborah.
Sorry.
Okay, I think she did it unintentionally. So yeah, No more questions. Over to you, Brian.
Daniel, can you come up for a while, please? Brian, I have a question.
Okay. Yes.
I think that's Clara. Let me just take a. Let me mute everyone, Brian. Here we go. I had to do it in one shot, sorry, because I think a bunch of guys just unmuted themselves. And I think I don't know, was Sanjana or Lara who took the floor before?
Sanjana, hi.
Hi, Sanjana.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, it's quite clear that if any changes have to be made, they have to be made in the tool. And then in Fiori, one can only see what changes have been made there. And it shows us the analytics based on the information available in the tool. My question is, instead of looking at the analytics here, you also have charts option available in the tool. So if I want to see what is the adjusted history and, what was the actual consumption history and what is the final consumption history, you can also see it in the tool. So why do we really need to go into Fiori to check this?
I think, Brian, you're muted.
All right. This good thing of having the camera on, right? You can see my mouth moving and you know I'm muted. All right. So very good question, I was saying. And that's why I was showing you guys also on screen. I was playing a bit with the charts. Now, where I think Fiori comes in and really shows you the power of the tool is, for example, if I'm showing you the graph here, it's true that we have this graphical information that we can see the changes for, right? But we can only do this for a specific, let's say, product ID, for a specific template that we're looking at. It's not easy to share with anybody else. And then maybe once we do it, we can't really keep it with us, right? Now, when we go to Fiori, what we can do with this graph, once we save it, is always have it available for us. And here's where I think this is where Fiori, let's say, wins this battle, right? For example, if I save this right now the way it is, and I load it next week, a month from now, or 2 months from now, I won't have to automatically the data and the adjustments that have been performed throughout the weeks and throughout the days will automatically show me this in a graphical manner, like I'm displaying it right now. And once it's saved, I don't have to create it again. I basically just have to recuperate my analytics and it'll show me this report without me having to do anything else but just click on the report itself. It'll display with the latest information. Then another aspect of it, and once I get into the dashboards, is if, for example, you create 5, 6, 10 different reports of things you like to look at constantly and you like to monitor throughout the months, you can do that too. So you can create 5 or 6 reports and then add those reports to a dashboard and then simply access your dashboard to view the progress of that data day by day, week by week, and month by month. And that's the next thing I want to jump into, right? To show you that once you've created a report and you've created exactly how you want it to be displayed and what information you want to display, you can add it to a dashboard where you can have 6 or 7 other reports and just access that dashboard and display all this information at once. With the supply chain planning tool, you'd have to go in every time, select your filter, load the template, go to the graph, click on the key figures, and you'd have to repeat that process over and over again. While with Fiori, you'd have it all displayed in one click. Yeah, I think that would answer your question. And we can do that right now, okay? That's actually the next thing we want to show you guys.
Yeah, thanks, got it. So just to sort of recap it, to understand what you just said is that if any changes are made in the historical data template in the tool, and we have already created our filter in Fiori, taking into consideration certain product IDs and the plant, and we have saved it, it'll automatically get updated if whenever we make any changes in the tool.
There you go, exactly.
Okay. That's nice. Thank you.
Very good. Very good. I'm glad that's sinking in and we're clarifying it, right? For a bit there, I thought I was losing you guys. I know I wanted to start with the most simple thing, which was the filters, but I think once we showed you guys the reports, now it's all starting to make sense to you.
Yeah, and Brian, everyone now starts to kind of like connecting the dots and linking these two with Umoja BI or even Power BI to understand its potential in a way. So yeah, this if this was going to be my first time seeing Fiori, I would say, okay, so this is like the typical report that you created in Umoja BI. The framework is there created, and then you launch that report 3 months from now, and then the data is already refreshed with the same format that you wanted to have initially, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Okay.
So Erika in this same, sorry, Brian. Erika in the chat now is saying, can we say this is a BI for procurement, talking in Umoja terms? Some sort of like a strong statement, I would say, but over to you. I don't know if we can say that this is a BI for procurement, but over to you, Brian.
I would say this is a BI tool or reporting tool for the supply chain planning tool. That's as far as that would go in terms of defining. So you're looking at reports of your, let's say, the templates of your gross demand, right? Of every process of your gross demand. And now we're only looking at the historical data key figures. Remember the historical data template key figures. We could have done this for the gross demand as a whole, okay? And we could have seen that too. So I wouldn't want to define it as a BI tool, or let's just think of this as an analytical tool for our supply chain planning tool, for each one of the templates that we work with in the supply chain planning tool. Okay, but as you can see, and the more familiar you become with this, the more you're going to start making use of this the way you want it to. Okay, now let me just show you, let me just go to my next step, okay, just so that you guys can see how the dashboard works, okay, and then maybe we still have time to jump back into the reports and play around with some of the reports, because this is just the first report I wanted to show you guys. I still think it's very drafty. I still think we can make it look even better and nicer. But I know your questions seem to be jumping beyond what I'm showing, so I don't want to make you waste your time either, right? Just remember that you have your graph options displayed below. So the type of graphs you can select are also here below if you want to show a trend column. Of course, each one of these options, and make sure that you will suit a specific need, right? So if we're looking for a trend, maybe I wouldn't use these product IDs. Maybe I wouldn't use these key figures. I would use something else. You can also use distribution and display this with a pie chart or anything, even the geographical display. Yes, Daniel? Oh, okay.
No, it wasn't myself, but just David, just on that note, David is trying to understand and trying to absorb all this information. He's suggesting whether we could have another session. I think that's perfectly fine. I mean, I don't know if in 2 hours we can cover all, but that's I think the reason behind sending the recording, sending the documentation, and on top of that, the exercises. I think that you, in this type of tool, you start understanding by doing exercises and by doing some gymnastics into the system, I think, rather than, having several sessions on the tool itself. Okay.
Yeah, so a quick reminder, right? We're not done yet. We still have almost 40 minutes of session. And what I want to do is I'm just going to save this report. I'm going to add this report in other 2-3 reports that I saved before this session. And I'm going to add them to a dashboard so you guys can see the final picture of what Fiori can do for you for a series of reports. But that's not the end. Then we can jump back in and repeat some of these steps for those of you who are still catching on, because I can definitely see that there's different levels in the classroom, right? Some people that already want to see, the tool as a whole, and others that are probably still wondering, wait a second, what is a planning filter, right? Or what is an analytics report? So let's just save this report as it is, okay? As ugly as it looks right now, I'm just going to save this one by clicking on the save button. And remember, I gave this one the name BB Fiori. I'm going to save it. Okay, we're saving this report, which of course you always have the option to go back and edit and save the changes that you're performing, okay? So this report is saved. You see you have your screenshot here of what your report looks like and all the settings that you gave it, right? Your name, the key figures, how you grouped it, the product ID, the type of graph that you selected, everything is there. Even on the information tab that you have here, all the information linked to the product IDs, the plant, everything that you have selected to create this report. If you want to edit the report, you can simply click on the button to edit. You can copy this one and duplicate it. So there's many more things you can do with this specific report. But now that we've saved it, let me go back to where we had our search page for analytics. Let me show you how many reports I have saved. And then I'm going to go to the dashboards and I'm going to add all those reports in the dashboard so you can see how you can have all your reports in one single location. Okay, so that in one glance, you can check monthly the progress of this, the supply chain planning tool, right? The specific templates. So I'm going to go back here to the analytics. Remember, this page was the first one that we went to when we were performing our search before we created an analytics. Okay, just in case you guys have forgotten where that was. If I go back to my home page right here, remember our planning filters was the first thing we did. Analytics was the second thing we did. If I click on analytics, I now have the option to search for the reports. So for example, if I know that I named all my reports starting with the initials BB, and I click on the magnifying glass, I should have all the reports that have BB with that name popping up, okay? So if any of them, see right there, BB, I clicked on go, and I have the names there, BB final gross, BB Fiori, BB historical consumption, statistical, Brian. So anything that I have saved with the name BB, all those reports are here. I can go and view each one of them individually to see, for example, I have one here for historical consumption. I have one for statistical forecast. I can click on that one. Automatically, the system will take me to that report. If I want to still make an addition, make some changes to the report, the system you see is refreshing and now will display that data for that report with the latest information of any updates that have been performed in the supply chain planning tool, okay, for this specific report. So you see, this is another report that I saved. So as I was saying before, what if I want to have all these BB reports, right, that I have saved 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in one single location, so that every time I run this, I can see these reports and these reports only. Very good. So pay attention to this. If I go back to my home page, we have now an option called dashboards that we can select here. And this dashboard is like, for example, if you guys watch Netflix or if you guys use Amazon Prime, for example, you can create your list of favorites, right? So you're creating your list of favorite reports. So the dashboard tells you, okay, which analytics do you want to add to this dashboard? All right, so we can search, for example, here, for those that start with BB. We can search for them. Okay, we have some of them here, so I can select these two, okay? And we have these that would be added to a specific dashboard. But right now, we don't have a dashboard created, or we haven't created one that we want to add all these analytics to. So let's create one of those first, and then we'll perform the same search and we'll add those to that dashboard, all right? So let's uncheck these. Let's remove my search. And let's go here to new. All right, you see this button called new. Let's create a new dashboard and give it a name. This one I'm going to also call BB Fiori and we'll call it training. Give it a name. We can give it a description. It's not required. We don't need to give it a category, but basically what we have is gross demand because that's what we're looking at. Okay. And we don't need to save it as favorite either. We're just creating the skeleton of a dashboard, of a new dashboard, an empty dashboard. Let's save it. And now we'll have an option here for the dashboard, Fiori training, which is empty, as we see here. Okay, there's nothing there. Now we can start adding information there. Have I lost anyone so far? Does anybody want me to repeat what I just did? Daniel?
Don't see any harm to do it again. I think it would be good. Yes.
Sure. So let's go right from the beginning. Okay. So remember, we did our reports under analytics, but now we want to put our reports into our dashboard. Okay. I selected dashboard. Just like with the analytics, we have a list of dashboards that have been created, all here with all the particular names, even my own. Anything that I always create, I always add a BB, so it's easier for me to find. Okay, so this is basically just a search page of the dashboards that you have created. You see the one I just created before, BB Fiori training, is already there. So these are dashboards that I have created and that I have added analytical reports to. What I did to create a dashboard is I went to the icon here called New. I clicked on New. I added a name. I didn't add a description. I basically gave it a category, gross demand, because that's what we're working with, and I saved it. Once I saved my dashboard under the name BB Fiori Training, and I saved it, automatically it appears here as one of my dashboards. Okay, let's cancel that creation of a new one because I already have it here. You see this BB Fiori Training, and I'm going to access this dashboard right now. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to access this dashboard skeleton. So you see there's nothing there. It's absolutely blank because I haven't added any reports to it yet. Let's start adding reports to this dashboard called BB Fiori Training. Take a look at what we have here on the right. Refresh. Basically, I can refresh this all I want. There is no information there. And then we have our Add button. Once I click on the drop-down, you have the option to select the analytical charts that we have just created, supply chain networks, customer alerts, process management instances, or alerts overview. What we created were analytic reports, right? Analytic charts. So that's the one we're selecting. I'm clicking on analytic charts, and now all those are displayed here below. We can also filter the results that we're getting by clicking on search, and maybe here, adding BB, and we have all the analytics that I have created before that I want to add to my dashboard. All right, I can select one, final gross demand value, another one, BB Fiori, another one for historical consumption, another one for statistical forecast. So you could have a report for every single template that you are using in the supply chain planning tool, right? So remember your supply chain planning tool. Remember that you have different templates that you make adjustments to. So maybe you want to report for historical data. Maybe you want to report for statistical forecast, one for EPP, one for equipment, one for gross demand, right? And you want one of these reports, you create one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, even 10 reports. You select them all once they've been created and you add them to your dashboard. Now, once I click on add, my dashboard will now be populated with those reports. You see? And all those reports are displayed here. So that's where you realize how Fiori is very useful for you. You spend your time creating your planning filters if you want to, so that you already have all that information in a specific planning filter. I want to see only the commodities for this sublocation for this plant. And there goes one report for historical data on that. On the next one, you create a planning filter that says, I want to see commodities for this plant, for that specific fund center, but now for the forecast. You create your report for that. Once you've created all your reports, you create your dashboard and add every single report to that dashboard so you have everything in one single glimpse. You see how you have the refresher for each one of these reports 1 second ago. So you already know how late these reports have been refreshed by. You see that each one of these reports up top has also a number of options that you can select from, and we're going to jump into those in a second. You see, BB Fiori also has some options. BB Historical Consumption also has the options, and the last one as well. Okay, you can refresh the data for one specific report. You see, right now I just refreshed that one. You can refresh it for the next one. So you'll get the latest information in just one quick shot. You can zoom in, you can expand that specific report, you can even access that report or go to the three dots to delete it, resize it. So really up to you what you would like to do with that specific report. Okay, so anything on the creation of a dashboard and the addition of the reports that I have just done. Okay, I can repeat this process again. We still have a full half hour, and since I know this is what's really driving your interest, I can even create a new report and then add it to this dashboard if you guys want me to.
Thank you, Brian. I think it was really quite useful to start really connecting all the dots all the way to the end with the dashboards. We do have, you were right, now things are popping up in terms of interest in the chat. First, on whether you can share, Anne is asking, nice to see you, Anne from Bangkok, hi. Can you share this dashboard with another user? Is there any type of limitation in order to share this data with other users? Over to you, Brian.
All right, very good. So the sharing option that was coming right now, right? That was my next point. Right here, if you guys see, right next to copy, you have a button for sharing. Just click on that button and we'll see the options that we have. Remember, just like with the filters that we created before, you have users that you can share this dashboard with, which should be all the users that are working with you and that have access to the supply chain planning tool and have the proper role, and the same with the user groups. Now, limitations, I guess you wouldn't be able to share. I'm not really aware of the amount of limitations that we have with Fiori yet in terms of sharing dashboards and so on, but within your planner group, within your plant, you should be able to share your dashboards with anyone that is in your plant or in your planner group, okay? Once you're in production, simply click on the user group option or even the user option that you have here, and you should have everyone that you can share this with right here. For example, if I want to share this with Daniel again, I can just write his name here, select his name, and that would be already shared with Daniel. The same thing as with any other group that you may find interesting to share this with too. Okay, UCS training, for example, I can add that here. And once I click on OK, this dashboard will also be visible to them when they log into Fiori. All right, once I click on OK, so I've updated the sharing information, and now this dashboard will be able to be shared and visible by your colleagues.
Thank you, Brian. It was very clear. I know, Sanjana, you raised your hand. Just hold for a minute or two. We have some questions related, and I'm going to go through the first one first. Lara, it's mentioning, of course, there are some limitations in terms of users. So why she's wondering whether Fiori has the ability, in a way, to schedule reports as we do in Moja BI. So you can have them already sent to the users in an email format. Is there any possibility related to the scheduling reports or scheduling dashboards? Over to you, Brian.
All right, very good one. To be honest with you, Lara, I'm not sure that we can do that in Fiori. I haven't even tested that one myself, so that's definitely one I'll take note of. I'm looking at it here to see if I can set up something or share it in an email, but I don't see the option available for me, at least not in the dashboard itself. I can go back now to the reports and see if I can check that. I haven't done that, I'll be honest with you. I haven't checked to share some of these by email. Since you can share them with a colleague, they can just access Fiori and see them there. But that's a very good feature that if not available in Fiori, maybe we can ask and see. If it is, I have to learn still how to do that. And if it's not, maybe we can add it. So Lara, quick answer is I don't know. And then my second answer is I can check that really quickly. Okay, I'm going to check with the reports first, because I definitely, the dashboard doesn't allow me to do that.
Thank you, Brian. While you look it up, we do have several questions related to exporting. Can we export these reports or even the dashboards into Excel or PDF or PowerPoint? Over here.
All right. So here, let's access one of these reports. So now I'm going back to just the specific report. And we're going to see here. Okay. So we have one of our reports. I can't remember what this one is for. Final gross demand right here. We have some options before I edit here to share. I don't know if you see it's right here at the bottom right side.
Yeah, we can see that.
On that, and here you go. So we can send this one by email. Very good. So that can be done. Now, scheduling it is another story. Sending it by email, definitely. Share on SAP Jam, I haven't done that one yet, or even save as a tile, so we can save that as one of our favorites directly in our tiles right from the beginning. We can share it as an email. Let me see if I can edit, and once I go on edit, if I have any more options. I don't see the one to schedule the reports. That one I don't, definitely. And now we're looking for, the other question was download it as a PDF, right? Okay, very good.
Yeah, or any other format that it's there.
So once I clicked on edit, now I have some more options below, right? Save or save as. And if I click on save as, okay, it's only telling me save as a chart. So I don't see the option here when creating your report. I don't think we're going to have here. This one, you know what? I'm going to call this one DC, okay? Fiori. So I don't start mixing them up. Let me see if I have any other option, but I think it's only saving it as a chart, but I'm not able to export it as a PDF. Let me see what else I can do, okay, before I leave that. So we're back to the edit mode. If I go to, okay, Excel add-in or web-based planning. This is not exactly, I'm taking risks here, but we can see, there you go. All right, so perfect. All right, so if you see here the option for go to, I have the web-based planning, which is probably the one I'm looking at now, and the Excel add-in. So if I click on the Excel add-in, I do see the option where it says here, you have chosen to, and I can save my file, probably here as a CSV file. I'll click on that one and I can access it right now. See if I can open it. I don't like the look of the file, but maybe I can open it. In Mac, you guys should probably try this in your PC. I don't think anything is opening up for me, or maybe my system is crashing because I can't even minimize my screen. Okay, here it is. All right, so Lara, I'm really just testing this with you, okay? We're doing this together, and I don't see any data coming up. Maybe it's just taking a little bit longer. There you go. So still action is taking place. This doesn't look that great. No. Okay, so I'll keep looking into that, Lara, and maybe I'll get back to you. I can even send you an email on that one. I just don't see the options to share. I only see emails, and with the go-to, I only see the Excel option, and then the web-based planning, which I'll click on now. If we have the options here, okay, and if we can't do it through there, the only other option I see is right here in the chart itself. Another option to download as CSV file. Let's see if that one will allow me to. Okay, I maybe have a better option. So formatted, let's go with formatted, limiter, it's fine, and I can download this one. Hopefully this is a bit better. But again, I still don't like the way I'm looking at the file when I'm downloading this one. Microsoft Excel. I'll click on this one once again. And again, maybe.
And Brian?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
After, when you finish with this, maybe we should give the floor to Sanjana because she's got a question.
Sure. So anyway, I'll keep looking into this one. I've just thought that I could do this quickly, but I don't see the exact option to download as PDF or as Excel. I'm sure that if we play around with the system a bit more, we can see that. And maybe let me know, Sanjana, if she wants to speak up or if she wrote her question in the chat, we can take a look at that one.
Hi, Brian. No, I didn't write my question in the chat. I wanted to ask you, since we'll all have our roles mapped in the system, so when you were talking about sharing with the group and sharing with the colleagues, we will not be able to send to anybody and everybody. I'm sure there will be some people who we would have access to be able to share this, right? That was my first question.
Exactly, right? So once you log into production, you should have the number of people that you're able to share this information with.
Okay, so the group will be predetermined, pre-decided. The number of colleagues that I will be able to share that with will be pre-decided. So in my drop-down list, I'll only be able to share with those groups and those people.
Exactly, right? As far as I know, that's the idea once we jump into production. Like, I know that's
second question was, when we create our dashboard, we can create many dashboards, right? It's not like once we can have many dashboards, because we may have, for different fund centers, we may just want to group them into different maybe regions or hubs or whatever. So we can have as many dashboards as we want, and within those dashboards we can have as many reports as we need to create for them.
There you go.
Yeah?
Very good.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
No, thank you. Very good. All right, very good question. Thank you for bringing that up. So exactly, as many reports as you want, as many dashboards as you want, you can create reports analyzing specific things and have a dashboard for each one of those specific things. Very good. So I'm glad that that's clear. Anything else, Daniel, that we can tackle? I was still giving it a last look into downloading as PDF.
Yeah, I was checking with Javier and some other students on whether their questions were duly answered by the last question done by Sanjana. I think it's related to the access and the users that you can set in the initial settings. But Farouk was asking whether we can share with external users, meaning someone who is not really mapped into the solution.
All right, so it's, again, as far as I know, you will only be able to share with people that are mapped to the solution. Now, the option to send an email, that one would definitely give you that option, but again, they will only be able to see that report in its final status, right? They wouldn't be able to log into the system and view it and receive an update of it unless you emailed it to them every time. Okay, I think that hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, and when we see Lara is just putting a comment, it's mapped to the solution means to Fiori related role, or maybe you are asking Lara, it's whether you are mapped even to the supply chain planning tool, right? But now we're saying mapped to the Fiori solution. Over to you, Lara.
Yes, I wanted to, because we know that Fiori is limited as access, at least based on the latest role guide that we have received. So when you're saying sharing with users and within the planning group, these users have to have this supply chain planning tool admin role, or it's enough any supply chain planning tool role?
Okay, thanks, Lara. So
thank you.
The roles, or anyone who has a role, as far as I know, I think also David is in the meeting if he knows more about this than I do. As far as I know, if you are mapped with a role in the supply chain planning tool, you should have access to Fiori. Whether it's limited, yes, it will be limited according to your role. I think the admins will have more access than others, but just when we're talking about just reports, planners should also have access to the reports and be able to share these reports with others. But it is true that yes.
So, sorry, Brian. Now I'm getting really confused about Fiori, because yeah, I think that for the sake of clarity of everyone, we should clarify who will have access to Fiori, because just last week I have posed a few questions regarding it, and they told me that it's just regarding the admin role, and the admin role should be limited. So it's important, at least for visibility and control over the process, would be nice to clarify and to have once for all the answer to this question: who will have access to see Fiori reports? Thank you.
Okay. And Lara, with this, how was this information given to you during a training?
with talking with the UCS team.
Okay, so again, then Lara, I'm not sure because as far as I was aware of, anyone that would have access to the supply chain planning tool would always have access to Fiori. If you receive different type of information that only the admin role will have access to Fiori, I'll leave that question to David, Cyril, if you guys are in the participants list, if you guys are paying attention to the session. And if we can't get an answer to that, Lara, I will look into that and give you an answer in writing. Okay, because as far as we know, even when we have delivered the training on the planning processes, we have a local demand planner role for Fiori, we have a senior demand planner role, a place planner role. There are other roles that will have access to Fiori, not only admin roles. All right, but if you're receiving different types of information, I'll leave that question to David if you're there, or Cyril to jump in. Maybe we can
also in the supply chain planning tool role guide. It's just mentioned under the admin role.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you. I wish I could give you an answer then now, but I won't be able to. Okay, we'll look into that again.
No rush, Brian. Important that because I'm really getting confused and I think it's an important role. So yeah, no rush. Sorry for that. Thank you.
It has to be clarified. Okay, and we'll definitely get back to you on that. Okay, and we'll also email that to the others that are part of this training so that we all have an understanding of what role you'll need to have access to Fiori.
Hi, Brian. I'm checking on the side with David. He's not currently in the meeting, but definitely we will send you some information, even in the email, with the documentation and the exercises that will come later. Okay. And I think that Sayed has raised his hand. Over to you, Sayed. Nice to see you there.
Thank you. Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, guys. I recall in the previous training that we had, it was categorically said that by default, those who have access to ACPT will have access to Fiori. And also, since Fiori is only merely a reporting tool, so where the users will not have any, not be able to make any impact on the outcome, on the result. So similar to the BI. So if this has changed, this role mapping has changed, please let us know, because all our planning as well as the access request that I have made to the colleagues is based on that assumption that it has not changed, meaning that by default, everybody who are mapped in ACPT gets access to Fiori. Thank you.
Thank you, Sayed. That it was actually my understanding too, right? With the supply chain planning tool access, automatically you have the Fiori access. But if Lara is mentioning that something else was said in a different meeting, we'll look into that and give you guys the final written answer, okay, on this.
I shared also, just in case, the document to which has been shared like time ago about the roles.
Very good.
Where it's this link with the admin role. But I hope that it's an old version. Thank you.
I hope so too. Okay, Lara. But thank you for bringing that up. Okay, we need to all have the same clear idea as to who will have access to this and what is expected from each person with the proper role. That's why we're delivering this training to you guys. You guys were part of the gross demand training, probably even part of the net demand training. So you should have the access to this tool, and you should be able to run your reports on what you're looking at and what you're adjusting in the supply chain planning tool. That's what makes sense to me. Okay, so again, avoiding the role conversation that I hope we can definitely clarify in writing. What else? We still have, I would say, even 15 minutes of the 2-hour session. What portion of what I've delivered today would you like me to repeat? Because I know that at the beginning it was a bit confusing. Now maybe it's all much clearer. Is there maybe even the access, right? I think that's probably one of the major things that we didn't share and said we wanted to share, right? How
Thank
do
you, Brian. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Brian. It's just I was about to remind you that. Thank you.
Okay. So here I'm going to out completely from Fiori here. And I think I may even have to log out from my email account. But as you can see, it's basically the login through your Unite ID. So there we go. The first thing we'll do is let's share the link. Okay, so Daniel, I can share this one in the chat. Second.
Okay.
All right, so automatically, here we go. Let me just do this one again, because I just want to get access to the link itself. There you go. It's not showing me here. So just give me 1 second. I'll log in normally. Okay, so your login is basically the same as you can see as when you log into your Unite ID. It's asking you for that same information. I'll share the link with you right now. You'll also get your verification code, okay, like I just did. And I'll share the link with you guys and let me know if you guys can access it as well. Now, here you go. Now, finally, I have my link up top. And let's share this one in the chat. Okay. Here we go, guys. Let me just quickly go into the chat.
I think Anish already put some URL there. Okay.
I don't know why this is extremely slow for me, but thank you, Anish. Yeah, for those of you who have been in our trainings, we shared this link with the exercises. So there you go. That's the link itself. Just click on it and you should be taken to the sign-in page, right, where you have to add your Unite ID. So your email Unite ID, you receive your code, and that's how easy it is to log into your application. Okay, this is the training environment login, so you should all have access to this without a problem. And now you can start playing around with the analytics and dashboards. We'll also send you guys the exercises so that you can play around with navigation and reports. Is there anything else, Daniel, besides what we've covered already? If someone wants me to repeat something.
Hi, thank you, Brian. In terms of roles, what I said, I put in the chat is just in terms of roles, all the casuistic and all the limitations, if any, access and stuff. We will get back to you with, let's say, clear statements, if any. We have asked the solution team in New York as we speak now, in order to have full clarity ourselves as well. So we can share with you in just a couple of days from now. Okay, so in terms of roles, just wait for news on that side. And then I know, Sayed, again, you raised your hand, so over to you, sir.
Yeah, this goes to Brian. Brian, there was one important feature that I have seen in Fiori, where you can set some kind of alerts for certain parameters, like, you know, when certain level of stocks goes into a red zone or anything like that, you know. But I didn't see that today, you know. I mean, you setting that feature. I mean, especially for the managers, you know, they're very handy, you know, to get some alerts on certain
Okay.
items. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, this takes me to, I think you're talking about the managing of processes, right? So since we were diving into the reports so much, we left the managing of processes aside, but I think that's what you're talking about. We're going to jump into this now. Okay, we could jump into this quickly so you guys see what we're looking at, but with the whole role discussion and who has access to this and who's going to be doing what, I think this may cause a little more confusion, but still we'll jump into this because it's also something Lara was inquiring about. Very quickly at the beginning, I did mention that everyone should access their profile, click on settings, and make sure that the notifications are set. So that's one of them, right, Sayed? I think, but you were probably referring to the ones that are linked to jobs not being completed, right? Let's say we're tracking people's progress, how to be.
Correct. Yeah, because, you know, certain jobs are, you know, functions that you have given as a manager, you know. I mean, if you have given or delegated certain things where you can follow up and, you know, the system gives you alerts. They're very handy actually, those alerts.
So here's where the discussion comes in, and I wasn't going to touch up on it now that we talked about the roles, but this is what you're talking about, Sayed. So the Fiori also has an option here for managing processes, where we basically use this as the tracking tool, right, for the jobs that have been performed in the system, right? So if you are a planner and you have a group of planners in your mission that are going through the different templates and are performing your adjustments, you're checking for your auto cleansing, you're adjusting your statistical forecast. Each one of these actions in the system is tracked in Fiori and is given a particular name, right? Or a particular owner, a process step owner. So all of these steps and all these actions that you do in the supply chain planning tool will then have to, in the Fiori system, have to be checked as marked as completed or as in progress. And I think this is what you're talking about, right? So if I go into the managing of processes and I go into my... Yes? Okay.
ये देखो ये विटामिन्स ठीक है ये आई नहीं है MANS इधर आई है विटामिन्स के स्पेलिंग दोबारा पढ़ो
So say it if you're still with me.
नहीं आके नहीं टाइम
Daniel, I'm not sure if you can. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I just muted Perina. She was now a presenter over here.
Okay, so under the My Processes section, and this is again thinking that everyone who has access to the supply chain planning tool and has a role in the supply chain planning tool will have access to Fiori and will be a process owner of a specific step also, or just a process owner in general. You will have your processes displayed below that you will access, and you will have to, just like with a notification in a write-off or a service order that you have created, check which one of the steps you have performed, right? And I think this is where Sayed was going with, as a process owner, how can you check or how can you be notified if a task has been performed on time, right? If, let's say, Brian Baracina is responsible for reviewing of products related to master data, or confirming consumption data for EFMS, right? Or Casper is responsible for maintaining reviewing of the unit price. All these should be done or performed within a specific period in the supply chain planning tool, and they're assigned to a specific person, which should be the owner of a process step. And let's say if Sayed is the process owner and the one who has to be monitoring that everyone is doing their job, each one of these should have a let's say a time frame to be performed under. So if we select each one of these individually, okay, and we now mark them as in progress or not, if you can see, Sayed, all of these will have their time frame to be set as. Now, I don't know if in the training that you received, they went into, okay, this is probably, there you go. You guys probably checked the overall instead of the one. Okay, so let me just go back to the process list. Let me just access the process list entirely. So Sayed, as a process owner, what they probably showed you is right here, the option, if we scroll down for the processes, is to how to probably set up a notification for anything that was late here. I'm not sure when they showed you this or how they showed you this or how in depth you went with this setup, but I won't be showing you guys this here unless this is this, Sayed, what you wanted to see? Because I think this is definitely going way beyond what we wanted to show today.
Yeah, this is part of that actually, because this is something that the theory managers require, like for the oversight as well as for monitoring. So
okay.
There was another one. Well, I recall that thing to do with monitoring of stock holdings, so something similar to that. There you will be able to make alerts, to anyway. So I don't know where it was. It was for sure it was in Fiori. Yeah. Anyway, this is one of them, the process owners, and also where you are standing with the processes, the overall monitoring. Yeah, that was one of those good things, as someone sitting in overall, or monitoring, would be good.
Yeah, exactly right. I think that some of these actions that you're talking about are more related to other senior roles or people that will have a bit more of a monitoring role in the tool itself. With this particular session, we just wanted to focus on planning filters, the analytics, the dashboards, setting up your notifications, and already that took us the 2 hours, right? I don't think we'll have time for more, and I don't want to confuse those that have picked up on how to create the reports at this point. If we have another session for Fiori where we can dive a little more into this, definitely Sayed, we'll get back to you guys and let you know. But I think so far we should probably close the session here before we confuse everyone else that is probably very new to this. I know that some of you have had more time to dive into the system than others. Daniel, thank you, Sayed. Thanks for understanding.
Thank you, Sayed, for that. Well, yes, I'm mindful of the time. Yes, we just reached a 2-hour time. But Ghassan would like to see how the system will show gross demand for a fund center in Fiori. If that is possible, or we can do it quick, or we can just show in another session.
I can show that very quickly, and I think it's a good closer to the session, right? Because we're going to go back.
Thank you, Brian.
We're going to go back into the analytics, remember, to create our reports. So we click on the analytics, and I'm going to create one from scratch. Okay, instead of using one of the ones that we already have. Remember, this page allows you to search for your analytics that have already been created. But if you want to create a new one, you simply come here and select analytics chart. And this will take you to the page where we now can create our report or our analytics. Now, let's go and search for exactly what you want. Now, I'm not going to use any planning filter, right? You're telling me that you want to search for the fund centers, right? That was the main question. Right, Daniel?
Yes, Brian. Yes, exactly.
Let's right here, fund centers. Okay, that's going to be the name of my report. And now I'm going to start adding the information that I require. I'm going to do that for one plant only. Now, since I didn't select a planning filter, and I'm going to do this from scratch, I'm going to go here. Remember the filters option? If you click on this, you have all the other filter options that you don't have displayed in one shot. Okay, you see all the ones linked to basis, aggregate, component, contract, whatever it is that you're looking for. Here, the first thing we'll do is look for plant. So plant can be found either under location, okay, it's not here, or under product plant, or under sublocation. So you see, sublocation shows me plant, so I can select plant, click on OK, and one of my filters is going to be my plant. You see now I have set it up here. I come to the match box, and I say that I want to search for plant KE00. You see, when you created the planning filter, you avoid doing this over and over, step by step for every report. You just go to your planning filter, you select the one that you have set up, and you're done. If you don't, this is what you have to do. First, select your plant. Now we're going to look for the fund centers, right? So we should be looking for our sublocations, because remember that in the supply chain planning tool, your sublocation was your fund center. So that's another filter that we're going to be adding here. And we're going to be looking for the fund center or sublocation. Okay, so sublocation down here. And we have sublocation city, country, description, ID, sublocation type. So we'd have to know exactly what we're looking for here. Maybe your sublocation description would be a good option. We have all the options here to search by. I think I have one for Kenya. I think KE, probably not. Okay. All right. So, for example, if I wanted to look for a specific sublocation here, this one, health service, I would just select it, and I would be telling the system that I want to filter by sublocation here. If I'm not sure, if I just want to have everything displayed and then I can filter later on, you can do that too, right? Let's leave our sublocation empty. So even though we have our filter here for sublocation, let's leave that empty. Let's say that we want to look only for the plant, but let's at least sum it up to commodities, right? So we don't have all the product IDs for the plant K00. So that's one thing I'm going to do. I'm going to definitely look for my commodities. So I'm setting my filter still. and I'm going to select my commodity. I'm going to click on OK. I have my commodity ID here, and I'm going to, if I'm not mistaken, I should still have a commodity here. Oh, look, that was my Excel from before. It finally loaded it. All right, I'm just going to use this commodity that I have. So now instead of one specific product ID, I'm going to look for a commodity. Okay, this is it. I'm going to select it. And now I'm going to run my report. So I'm running my report for commodities and this plant. It's paused. I'm going to stop refreshing. Now we have our report should show up. Why is it showing me no data? Remember what I showed you guys before? Remember that your target currency here, pay attention, make sure that it's displayed as US dollars. And more importantly, make sure that your target unit of measure is BAS, okay? And that should probably, when we refresh, we should have some sort of data, okay? If not, I'll see what else I have done that is not displayed. Okay, but we should have our data for this commodity, for this particular plant loading. And this has happened to me before the training where it hasn't shown, but let's see if I can add a key figure first. So remember our key figure. Now let's look for our, I don't think we have sublocation here. Let's see if we can search for that key figure. Because remember the sublocation is probably an attribute, but not a key figure. Okay, so exactly. What would we want to be looking for, right? As a key figure, are we looking for historical data? Maybe our final gross demand. Maybe let's look for that. Gross demand final instead. All right. So you have to know exactly what key figure you're looking for. If not, you're going to run into this type of issue. Okay. So maybe we can look for our final gross demand snapshot. Value. Okay, we can look for this final gross demand value so we can see it in US dollars. All right, let's add that key figure. Let's see if that now loads some sort of data. There you go. Okay, so now we have something. So our key figure, final gross demand value, it's showing us the value of this particular commodity for this particular plant that I filtered with no specific time periods. Let's add a time period so that we can have our data a little more grouped. Here, maybe for the year, let's go for the year, okay? This particular year that we're looking at now. So I'm just gonna put next year, but I'm not gonna add any new ones. So we're just gonna have the year 2021. Let's click on that. And now what we should have here is the year 2021 and all our final gross demand value for that commodity, okay? If you wanna see all the product IDs in that commodity, we're going to display them now and also the fund center. So now if I want to jump into the fund center, remember the group by option is what is equivalent to attributes in the supply chain planning tool, right? So if we want to look for that sublocation, here's where we would have to go looking for it. We click on the matchbox, we add sublocation, and now here we should have the sublocation. All right, here we go. Sublocation ID, description, city, country, type. Let's go with description for now, and we'll click on select. What this is going to do now is break down all the information I have here by sublocations where this commodity is found, okay? So remember, I'm filtering by this commodity because if not, I would just have too much. But if you want to look at your fund centers in the supply chain planning tool in Fiori, what you're going to be looking for is sublocation. Remember that in the supply chain planning tool, sublocation is your fund center. So you select the attribute sublocation, that will display all the fund centers that are linked to this plant, which is K00, and that this particular commodity fall under. Okay, so I think this is what you wanted to see. All right, in a nutshell, that would definitely work for you. Yes, Daniel?
Yeah, I was just checking with Ghassan whether that was clear. I think it was clear to me, at least, to understand how you can break it down. Once, because what you did is you just created the report, let's say, for this particular commodity, and then once the report is created, then you grouped by sublocation description, and now you can see the breakdown by each of the fund centers. So Ghassan is happy with that in the chat. Over to you, Brian.
Very good. So again, if you, for example, now you may be wondering, I don't even know what commodity that is, right? You don't see this commodity information, you just have the number. So yeah, we have our fund centers, but we don't know what commodity we're looking for. Remember that you can always select that attribute here and display it as well, right? So if we set, for example, here, commodity, and now instead of commodity here, if we search for this, writing, okay. If we went with commodity description, and I selected this, since I already told the system what commodity I want, now the description of this commodity will show up. And if you see, it's temporary medical staffing needs. So that's what I'm looking at. Temporary medical staffing needs for the year for each fund center. Maybe this is not the best way to display your graph. You can go here and change it. You can also say, I only want to see one specific fund center. What I would recommend there is then to go back in your filters and to add your filter for sublocation and then filter by one of these. Okay. So you would go here, filter, add your filter for sublocation. Make sure that you select it, sublocation description, or even sublocation ID, both of them. Click on it, and now once they're available, here you would simply just select for the one that you want. Okay, I don't think I can move it, but if I only wanted UNON UN Cares, I would go here and say, okay, so just show me UNON UN Cares. See, and then just by selecting this one and clicking on OK, everything else would disappear, and I would only have that one displayed. All right, I know we're 10 minutes, 11 minutes past the hour. Daniel?
Yeah, I think it was quite clear, and it was an important question because at the end of the day, the analysis in the planner, it's in most of the cases, it's driven by Fund Center, so it was useful. No more questions, and I see a lot of feedback from the students saying that thank you, that was a good session. So over to you before we just wrap it up.
All right, well, if you guys were happy with the session, then I'm very happy too. We wanted to make sure that we covered all your needs related to Fiori, right? Planning filters, your analytics, your dashboards. If you guys understood that and you can create your own reports, then that's what we wanted to convey, right? If we're going to get back to you with the roles, again, thank you, Lara, for bringing that up. Sayed, I think you were probably going a little more detailed and maybe some more senior functions, so please excuse us if we didn't cover that in this session. Remember, it's recorded. We'll send the presentations and even some exercises you can practice. The link to Fiori is also in the chat, so please make sure that you check that out. And we'll also share the recording of this session with you. It was a pleasure, as always, to have you guys, the students. Daniel, thank you very much for monitoring the chat. And if you want to say your few words, all I say is to thank you guys and until next time.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. It's not easy to shrink the Fiori part in only 2 hours. So it was a great effort. And just a piece of advice from my experience. At the end of the day, reporting dashboards is just a matter of practicing, rather than going through theoretical sessions. So please, the moment you start using the environment, use it, because there is no transactional actions. So it's a read-only type of reports that you're gonna launch. So the more you use it, the better in order to do your analysis. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much, Brian. And we will send all the information related to this session, plus the recording, in just a few minutes from now. Thank you, Brian.